Let's get into it. Everyone wants to talk about why avoidants leave, why they pull away, why they ghost, why they sabotage love. But not enough people are asking the more powerful question, why do avoidants stay? Why do they never leave the one person who figures them out? Because yes, avoidants are runners. Yes, they're uncomfortable with vulnerability, but they don't run from people. They run from patterns that feel unsafe. So if you're sitting there heartbroken, wondering why they left you but stayed with someone else, let me break it down for you. It's not about being better. It's not about being more attractive or more available. It's about emotional energy. The people avoidants stay with do 7 very specific things. And once you understand them, the whole dynamic shifts. Avoidants don't actually fear love itself. In fact, many of them crave connection just as deeply as anyone else. What they fear is emotional enmeshment. The sense that being close to someone will come at the cost of their independence, identity, or emotional safety. To someone with an avoidant attachment style, love can feel like a trap. The closer they get to someone, the more vulnerable they feel. And for avoidants, vulnerability often feels like danger, not intimacy. This fear usually traces back to early experiences where their emotional needs were either ignored, overwhelmed, or inconsistently met. They learned, sometimes without even realizing it, that being dependent on others made them feel unsafe, smothered, or powerless. So in adulthood, they develop a strong need to protect their autonomy. They associate closeness with losing control or being emotionally engulfed. And this is where the confusion starts, because to a secure or anxiously attached partner, love means closeness, sharing, togetherness. But for the avoidant, those very things can trigger their defense mechanism. That's why they often appear emotionally unavailable or aloof. It's not because they don't feel, it's because they feel too much, too fast, and don't know how to regulate it. Love starts to feel like a threat to their internal stability. When they sense someone is getting too close, they fear that their boundaries will be erased, their needs will be neglected, or that they'll be consumed by the other person's emotions. So they do what feels safest. They pull away, shut down, or create distance. Avoidants often thrive in the idea of love, attraction, romance, the chase, but they struggle in the maintenance of intimacy. They fear being asked to merge too deeply. If a partner becomes overly dependent or emotionally intense, the avoidant interprets it as a warning sign. I'm losing myself. I'm being asked to give more than I can. It's not that they don't want to be close. It's that they fear that closeness will cost them their sense of control or individuality. Ironically, avoidants tend to be drawn to people who make them feel emotionally alive, often anxious partners who seek closeness and reassurance. But once the relationship deepens, that very intimacy starts to feel suffocating. This triggers what's known as the deactivating strategy. They minimize emotional connection, focus on flaws, and convince themselves that they don't need the other person. It's their nervous system trying to reestablish a sense of safety by creating space. They don't necessarily want to leave the relationship. They just need to breathe. This fear of emotional enmeshment means avoidants often feel safest in relationships where boundaries are clear, where they don't feel emotionally responsible for the other person's mood, and where they're allowed to maintain their autonomy. They thrive when they're with someone who can offer connection without pressure. Someone who's emotionally grounded, doesn't chase, and respects space. That's when the avoidant begins to feel secure enough to open up. If you love someone with an avoidant attachment style, the best thing you can do is understand that their distance isn't always rejection. It's often fear. Fear of losing their freedom. Fear of disappointing you. Fear of being smothered. And most importantly, fear of being fully seen and still not being enough. The key isn't to pull harder. The key is to stay rooted in your own emotional strength. Offer connection, but don't demand it. Be present, but don't overextend. And always remember, avoidants don't fear love. They fear disappearing inside of it. When they trust that they won't lose themselves by loving you, that's when they finally begin to stay. When you're in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, the instinct to chase them when they pull away can feel overwhelming. You want to reconnect, clarify things, fix the emotional gap. But here's what most people don't realize. Chasing an avoidant only pushes them further away. Because the avoidant doesn't respond to pressure or emotional pursuit, they respond to space. And more than that, they respond to stability. The right partner isn't the one who clings tighter, but the one who knows when to pause, breathe, and hold their ground. Avoidants are wired to protect their independence. That need for emotional distance isn't a strategy to hurt you. It's a deeply ingrained mechanism to protect themselves from feeling overwhelmed or trapped. When a partner rushes in, asks too many questions, demands connection, or becomes emotionally reactive, it sends the avoidance nervous system into overdrive. They start to feel suffocated, not because they don't care, but closeness feels like pressure instead of peace. This is why the right partner doesn't chase. They don't respond to withdrawal with panic. Instead, they give the avoidant what their system is crying out for. Space without abandonment. There's a difference. Giving space doesn't mean cutting someone off, going cold, or using silence as punishment. It means recognizing the avoidant's need for emotional regulation and choosing not to take their distance personally. It's staying grounded and emotionally steady without overcompensating. Now here's the magic. When an avoidant feels that they're not being pressured to connect, they relax. When the other person isn't anxiously trying to fix the relationship or demand more than they can give, the avoidant starts to feel safe. And once they feel safe, they're more likely to move toward closeness, not away from it. This is why stability is so important. Stability, in this context, isn't about perfection. It's about emotional consistency. The right partner isn't constantly asking, "Are we okay?" or "Do you still love me?" Instead, they lead with confidence. They trust their own value. They create a calm, grounded, emotional environment that makes it easier for the avoidant to come forward at their own pace. An avoidant doesn't want to feel like a project to be fixed or a puzzle to be solved. They want to feel like they can be themselves, flaws, fears, and all without being judged or controlled. The partner who stays centered, who doesn't take the distance personally, who sets boundaries without threats, creates the very thing an avoidant has never really had, emotional freedom inside a relationship. And it doesn't mean tolerating poor treatment or being endlessly patient with inconsistency. It means knowing your worth so fully that you can love someone without chasing them. You can offer support without abandoning yourself. And most importantly, you can walk away with peace if your emotional needs aren't being met, without needing them to change in order for you to feel whole. The avoidant, over time, begins to notice the difference. They notice that you don't fall apart when they pull back. They notice that your world doesn't revolve around their validation, and that kind of self-respect and steadiness, it's powerful. It creates a new kind of safety, one where love isn't conditional on closeness, and where connection isn't built through fear or pursuit, but through presence. So no, the right partner doesn't chase. They don't plead, fix, or shrink themselves to be chosen. They hold space. They stay steady. And by doing that, they become the one person the avoidant doesn't feel the need to run from. Because for the first time, love feels like something they can breathe inside of, and that changes everything. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotional safety is everything. But it rarely looks the way most people expect. Avoidants aren't necessarily looking for constant reassurance, deep conversations, or dramatic displays of love. What they crave, often without knowing how to articulate it, is emotional non-reactivity. They need to know that when they show up imperfectly, when they pull away, struggle to express their feelings, or go quiet, the other person won't explode, panic, or try to fix them. Because that right there is what makes them feel seen instead of smothered. Avoidantly attached individuals were often raised in environments where their emotional needs were either ignored or met with inconsistency. As a result, they developed an internal belief that their emotions weren't safe to express, or worse, that emotional closeness leads to loss of control or disappointment. So they learned to self-regulate by pulling away. They internalized the idea that needing others equals weakness, and that true safety comes from maintaining distance. This is why when they start to form emotional connections in adulthood, their system goes on high alert. Intimacy may feel good at first, but the moment it starts to deepen, they begin scanning for danger. Will this person become too dependent on me? Will they expect more than I can give? Will I lose myself in this relationship? If the other person responds with emotional volatility or reactivity, it only confirms their fears. But when a partner remains grounded, even in the face of the avoidant's emotional distance, it creates a completely different experience. Instead of triggering the avoidance fear response, it signals safety. Non-reactivity doesn't mean being cold or indifferent. It means being emotionally regulated. It means holding space for their experience without making it about your own panic or unmet needs. And this kind of calm presence is incredibly powerful for someone who has always expected emotional chaos in close relationships. When an avoidant feels that they can be themselves without having to manage another person's emotional state, they start to open up slowly, but genuinely. That's when they begin to share little pieces of themselves. They test the waters. They offer small bids for connection. And how you respond in those moments shapes everything. If you meet their emotional vulnerability with pressure, if you say, why can't you just talk to me more? Or you never open up, they shut down. But if you meet it with warmth and patience, if you say, thank you for telling me that, or simply sit in the moment without rushing, it signals that they can relax, that they're not going to be punished for showing up as they are. Emotional safety is created when a partner doesn't over-personalize the avoidance behavior. It's built when you allow silence to exist without immediately needing to fill it. When you let a pause in conversation be just that, a pause, not a threat. It's also created through consistent, calm communication, not ultimatums, not guilt trips, just a steady presence that says, I'm here, I respect your pace, and I'm okay even when you need space. The irony is, avoidants don't open up in response to closeness being forced. They open up when they no longer feel obligated to connect. When the emotional environment feels peaceful and non-judgmental, they come forward willingly. That's when real connection begins, not through pushing, but through presence. So if you're trying to build something real with an avoidant, remember this. It's not about saying the right thing or being emotionally perfect. It's about creating a space where their nervous system can finally rest, where they can feel what they've never truly felt in relationships, safe, seen, and free to just be. Avoidants often get misunderstood. From the outside, it may seem like they don't care, aren't emotionally invested, or are incapable of deep connection. But the truth is, avoidants do bond, just not in the way many people expect. They don't respond well to high drama, emotional outbursts, or grand romantic gestures. Instead, avoidants form emotional attachments through consistency and a calm, grounded presence. What feels like boring to some is actually safe to them. And safety is the doorway to emotional intimacy for someone with an avoidant attachment style. For an avoidant, emotional chaos is not romantic, it's threatening. Many avoidants grew up in environments where emotional expression was unpredictable, overwhelming, or downright unsafe. They may have had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable or inconsistent, and they learned that the best way to protect themselves was by withdrawing, staying quiet, and becoming self-reliant. This history makes their nervous system highly sensitive to emotional intensity. So when they enter adult relationships and are met with emotional highs and lows, clinginess, constant arguments, or even love bombing, it doesn't feel exciting. It feels suffocating. It confirms their belief that closeness equals instability, that intimacy will cost them their peace. And that's when they pull away. But what avoidants can't always articulate is that deep down, they want connection. They just want it in a way that doesn't make them feel emotionally hijacked. And this is where consistency and calm presence come in. Consistency is crucial because it reduces emotional risk. Avoidants are always scanning for signs that someone is unpredictable or emotionally overwhelming. If you show up one day with love and warmth and the next with anxiety or drama, it reinforces their core fear. This person is going to demand more than I can give. But if you show up with steady emotional energy, no matter what's happening, they begin to feel safe. You become someone they don't have to brace themselves around. Calm presence works in a similar way. Avoidants have a tendency to disconnect from their emotions when things get intense. So when a partner reacts with urgency, criticism, or intense emotional expression, they withdraw to protect themselves. It's not that they don't care, it's that they don't know how to stay connected in the face of emotional chaos. But a partner who can stay grounded, communicate calmly, and hold emotional space without pressure, that's the partner an avoidant starts to trust. This doesn't mean you have to suppress your emotions or be emotionless. It means you learn to self-regulate, to express your needs and feelings in a way that's centered and non-reactive. When you do that, you become the emotional anchor avoidance never had growing up. You provide a new experience, one where they can be close to someone without being engulfed by them. And when that consistency and calm are combined over time, the avoidance starts to open up, slowly, quietly, subtly. They may not say, I love you in a big, bold way, but they'll show it in small acts of reliability in the way they start including you in their routine, in how they make room for you without feeling trapped. These are their love languages, subtle, grounded, and often overlooked by those expecting fireworks. So if you want to build a bond with an avoidant, forget the drama. Forget trying to impress them with intensity. Show up. Be steady. Be calm. Don't make love a performance. Make it a presence. That's how you create a connection that lasts. Not by setting off emotional fireworks, but by being the one place they can finally put down their armor and exhale. One of the biggest misconceptions people have when dealing with avoidant partners is believing that setting boundaries will push them away. Many worry that saying no, asking for space, or asserting their needs will be perceived as rejection. But the truth is, for someone with an avoidant attachment style, boundaries are not rejection, they're relief. In fact, they're often respected and even quietly desired because they create clarity, safety, and emotional balance. Avoidants are deeply sensitive to emotional intrusion. They struggle with the idea of losing themselves in a relationship. Whether consciously or not, they fear being emotionally engulfed, becoming responsible for someone else's feelings, being expected to show up in ways they don't feel ready for, or having their autonomy compromised. That's why they pull back, go silent, or seem emotionally unavailable. It's not because they don't want closeness. It's because they don't want to feel consumed by it. In relationships where there are no clear boundaries, avoidants feel on edge. They start to anticipate emotional pressure, even if it's unspoken. They feel like they're being expected to do something, reassure, fix, respond, or emotionally perform, and that perceived demand overwhelms them. But when a partner sets healthy, firm boundaries without guilt or emotional chaos, something changes. The avoidant finally feels like there's structure in the emotional space, and structure to an avoidant feels safe. Boundaries give them a clear roadmap. When you say, this is what I'm okay with and this is what I'm not, they don't have to guess. They don't have to worry about disappointing you unknowingly. They know where the lines are, and ironically, that helps them stay closer, not further away. Without boundaries, they assume closeness will eventually equal emotional overdependence. But with boundaries, they can breathe. They can trust that the emotional environment won't become unpredictable. The most powerful boundaries are not reactive or punishing. They're calm, direct, and rooted in self-respect. Instead of saying, if you don't text me more, I'll leave, a healthy boundary might sound like, I enjoy hearing from you and feeling connected. When I go long stretches without communication, it impacts my ability to feel close. If that's not something you're able to do, I understand, but I'll need to adjust how I engage in this relationship to protect my peace. That message doesn't blame. It doesn't shame. It simply communicates reality. And avoidants actually respect that. When an avoidant is with someone who has no boundaries, someone who tolerates emotional inconsistency, overextends themselves, or anxiously tries to keep the connection alive at any cost, they often lose respect for the dynamic. Not because they're cruel, but because it reinforces their belief that intimacy is messy, unbalanced, and draining. But when they're with someone who says, I care about you, but I care about myself too, they lean in. That emotional self-containment makes the avoidant feel less trapped. It makes them feel like the relationship won't become a burden. It's important to understand that boundaries aren't about control, they're about clarity. You're not drawing a line to keep someone out. You're drawing it so that both people know where they stand. For an avoidant, that clarity helps them feel emotionally safe. It allows them to step into the relationship at their own pace without the fear of being overwhelmed or consumed. So no, setting boundaries won't push them away. What pushes them away is emotional unpredictability, inconsistency, and pressure. Boundaries do the opposite. They create a container that allows the avoidant to experience closeness without panic. They build respect, and in the long run, they become the very reason the avoidant stops running. Because when you have strong boundaries, you're not just protecting yourself. You're creating the kind of emotional space where even the most guarded hearts can start to open. Avoidant individuals are often drawn to partners who seem grounded, those who know who they are, can manage their emotions without spiraling, and don't demand constant reassurance. This is because emotional intensity can feel threatening to someone with an avoidant attachment style. They're not trying to hurt anyone by pulling away. They're trying to maintain their internal sense of safety. And here's what makes all the difference. The partner who can self-regulate and mirror emotional security becomes irreplaceable to them, not because they're overly accommodating, but because they offer what the avoidant never had growing up, a relationship that doesn't feel like a threat. Self-regulation is the ability to manage your own emotions without needing someone else to constantly soothe or stabilize you. For people with avoidant attachment, being around someone who can stay calm under pressure, someone who doesn't spiral when things get uncertain, is a form of emotional oxygen. It signals that they don't have to take care of you emotionally, which removes a huge amount of stress from the connection. When a partner can express discomfort or needs without drama or pressure, the avoidant feels less like they're walking into a minefield. They don't have to brace themselves for a meltdown, an argument, or a main. Instead, they're met with a calm and emotionally responsible energy. That consistency starts to shift how they see the relationship, not as something threatening, but as something safe. Avoidants were often conditioned to expect emotional needs to come with strings attached. Love meant obligation. Vulnerability led to disappointment. That's why they tend to shut down when they sense emotional dependency. But when their partner shows that they can regulate their own emotional state, when they don't rely on the avoidant to fix their feelings, the avoidant experiences something unfamiliar but powerful. Trust without pressure. Mirroring security means more than just keeping your cool. It means being emotionally anchored in yourself. It means being direct without being aggressive, compassionate without being codependent, and available without being invasive. When you model emotional safety through your own behavior, you become the blueprint for what secure love looks like. And that modeling has more impact on an avoidant than anything you could say or try to explain. They may not immediately recognize the value in it, but over time it becomes unmistakable. They begin to associate your presence with emotional peace. They feel more like themselves around you. And for someone who's used to shutting down or being on edge in relationships, that kind of experience is rare and unforgettable. The partner who self-regulates doesn't take the avoidance need for space personally. They don't interpret distance as rejection. They know how to sit with their own discomfort and wait for clarity without escalating the situation. And when the avoidant returns, that partner is still there, not with resentment, but with steady energy and healthy boundaries. Reliability is what avoidants can't let go of. In a world where most people either over-pursue or shut down in return, the self-regulated partner stands out as calm, grounded, and emotionally sovereign. That kind of energy doesn't provoke the avoidance defenses. It softens them. So no, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the right words. You just have to master yourself. Because in doing so, you become the emotional anchor they didn't know they needed, but once they experience it, they don't want to lose. The partner who self-regulates and mirrors emotional security doesn't try to force connection. They embody it. And for the avoidant, that quiet confidence becomes the one thing they find themselves coming back to. Not because they were chased, but because they finally felt safe enough to stay. Avoidants don't stay because you beg. They don't stay because you prove your worth. They stay when they feel safe being themselves. They stay when you stop managing them and start mastering you. They stay when you stop reacting and start responding. They stay when you stop chasing and start leading with emotional maturity. Because the truth is, avoidants don't run from love. They run from the fear that love will drown them. But the one person who doesn't try to pull them under, the one who lets them swim at their pace, in their way, while staying steady on their own ground, that's the person they never forget. That's the partner they never leave. And that can be you. But only when you stop needing to be chosen and start choosing yourself first.